We're back live tonight here on In Focus. As mentioned earlier, Eskom has welcomed the energy regulator Nersas, granting the National Transmission Company of South Africa a license to operate the utilities transmission division. In a statement, Eskom says breaking the power utility into three entities, generation, transmission and distribution, is strategic and a key aspect of the company's turnaround plan. For more on the granting of the license, we're now joined by Nhlanhla Gumede, a regulator member responsible for electricity regulations at Nersas. Kwabe, good evening, and thank you very much for coming on and joining us tonight.
Good evening to you, Tab.
The decision, right, to grant this license, take us through the journey. What does Nersas look at, and what informs finally your decision to say now we are giving you the license?
Well, as a regulator, we are guided by the law. So the lawmakers back in 2006 decided to kind of have a foresight in terms of what the industry could look like going forward, where you would have generators. As you know, we now have independent power generators, but not just independent power generators, but we also have those generators that are not necessarily selling to the single buyer Eskom, but who are generating either for own use or they're actually supplying to their own customers. So that's one group. They also foresaw a situation where we had a transmission company responsible for the transmission systems, as well as having distributors. But they also foresaw a possibility that you would then have traders. So that's what guides us in the main. But of course, we are also guided by whatever at that particular point in time is published national policy. So in respect of the unbundling of Eskom, the guiding document is DPE's roadmap for Eskom in terms of unbundling. So we kind of take all of those independent pieces, put them together. But then what we then kind of look at is the strategic nature of basically where South Africa is going and guided by what is being done globally. So that's that in essence is the journey. Then of course we then receive an application. In this particular case, Eskom applied for the bundled license, which was a transmission license, trading license, and an import and export license. Unfortunately, our law is not written that way, so we actually had to look at transmission on its own, and then we'll then evaluate the other two applications separately. Yeah. So that is the process.
So what does it mean then that you're just giving them transmission? Others are looking at this and saying, well, this is a clear way of saying now even private power producers can begin to come into play. So this transmission company is not just going to be buying electricity from Eskom, but anybody who can produce electricity will be able now to sell directly to this transmission company, allowing for a degree of competition. Is that the idea?
Well, let's put it this way. What does it mean? I think, firstly, can I put it this way? We've just joined the league of a lot of nations, including countries here in Africa that have created this company that are called gridcos, which manage the grid. But in managing the grid, basically, it's the wires business and transformers at very high voltage, anything above 132 kilovolts or 132,000 volts. That's generally what is called a transmission system. But over and above that, it's then tasked with the system of operating the system. I know most people, when they think of a systems operator, they're thinking load shedding. Systems operators do more than just load shedding. Load shedding, yes, is but a very small part of what the systems operator does. But what does it actually mean? It does mean that if we follow global best practice, which is what we thought, in fact, that was what guided us in terms of how we evaluated the license, is that this creates an independent transmission systems operator, TSO and ITSO. Well, others will say, well, but it's still owned by Eskom Holdings, but it is a legally separate entity. So what it allows to do, and also in terms of what our law says, is that whoever operates the transmission system, which in our case also includes operating who also is a systems operator, is that that particular person has to treat everybody equally. Now, what does it mean? In some people's minds, that also means that this entity will be a buyer and seller of power. Well, that's not quite supported by the global best practice, but it's something that we are going to, which is why we are looking at trading separately, because the buying and selling of power for profit is a different kind of operation, which if you're looking at independent player, the question that you want to ask is that would you want to complicate this entity with that function of also being a player? Is it a referee or is it a referee and a player? Does it compete with other traders? So it's something that needs to be evaluated properly, hence why it's going to be dealt with separately. Again, being guided by where the country wants to go.
Yeah.
But what it does do, it does create an opportunity for independent power producers to be able to sell, not just to Eskom now.
Yeah.
Cape Town, we know that Cape Town has been wanting to buy power.
Yeah.
Other units as well who have got a muscle have been wanting to buy power. Basically, those discos, as they are called, would have an ability to actually buy power from whoever they want to actually buy power from through this entity.
So when you're saying the trade component is still going to be approved, what does that mean? Will it still be live within the transmission company of South Africa, or is the transmission company of South Africa just going to own the network and make sure that there's enough network that allows for people to plug in? Or will, as you go in the process, then also they will have the ability to purchase?
Well, let's put it this way. Again, I'm glad you've asked the question because I'd like to clarify that. So in terms of operating a system, you need to buy and sell power. You may need to also, because we're operating an interconnected system with our neighbors and whatever, you may want to actually import and export power. But the difference is that when we're operating a transmission system, we are allowed to do that, but not, in terms of our law, it defines it this way, not for commercial activity. That is, not for profit. So if we are buying power to stabilize the grid, for instance, a systems operator would be obliged, if you like, to provide what we call ancillary services. Yeah. So, for instance, as part of those ancillary services, something that most people know is just voltage control. Yeah. That if the voltage were to drop, so the system operator has got two choices. Either drops if the voltage drops, it's because there's an imbalance between supply and demand. So the systems operator has got one of two choices: either drop the load, which is what we know as load shedding, or actually purchase power to balance the load. Yeah. What we are saying is that it's inherent in terms of the process of systems operation to actually buy and sell power. Right. The difference is that it is not for commercial as a commercial activity. That is, it is not for profit. It's doing it to balance the system.
Is that where you come in? So you will come in and set the price at which they would need to buy electricity?
Well, it's going to be services. So in the past, currently Eskom, by the way, undertakes a lot of these activities, whether it's voltage control or just providing, in Asia, there are lots of services that Eskom is providing that for which we are not particularly being charged for. But the minute you've got an independent transmission and systems operator like this, it provides these services. So it is incumbent on Nersas to unbundle the tariff properly, to be able to identify the services and actually cost them, and then say for the services that you as the transmission operator provided, you shall be compensated. Of course, the form of compensation is then determined by Nersas in terms of the law. So yes, we will be determining. That's why as part of this, we actually have to look at this at the review of the pricing system, because we no longer have one Eskom anymore. We've got particularly this independent entity that's got particular services that it needs to charge for. The beauty with it is that all of us will then be able to understand, hopefully, to a greater degree now, what are the services that are provided? I know that everybody just knows load shedding, but systems operator does a whole lot of things, other services. But we need to be able to identify those services and actually identify who buys the services.
Right.
So it's not just, so there may be some of those costs that we will socialize with everybody, but some of those costs are actually can be identified and be charged to a particular, whoever causes those, whoever causes that cost should then pick up that cost. That again is informed, but that's what our law prescribes us to do.
And finally, as I let you go, the big question on everybody's mind is, does this having a separate transmission company means that things will look better in terms of generating capacity coming online?
Okay. That's been a question asked by a number of players out there, that is this a panacea for our problems? The answer to that is not really, because we are operating a system. Always simply saying that, so for instance, as you may have heard, there are bid windows that could not connect because we didn't have enough capacity in terms of the transmission system to be able to connect them. Now, clearly, if you have a dedicated player that's looking at just that, at improving that the system availability, that goes a long way to actually solving the problem. Secondly, we have a number of players out there who are simply saying, look, we don't necessarily want to be going through a public tender and actually selling our power through Eskom in terms of the single buyer, but we can avail our power at very competitive prices. And there may well be people out there that who may want to buy our power. Now, what this step does, it creates an opportunity for those players who want to participate on a merchant basis, at their own risk, who may want to participate in the system. All it gives them is an opportunity to say, as long as your power as long as the rule of a merit order of dispatch, that is, the cheapest power is dispatched first, and there is an independent player that can honor that, that we will take that risk. We don't need National Treasury to actually back us up. So it does present opportunities for that. But is that a panacea? The answer to that is no, it's not.
Kobe, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. That's Nersas Electricity Regulation member, and Gumete there.